In the beginning, before the name was ever spoken aloud in fear or reverence, there was only a woman and her breaking. Her name was Akantha, and this is her story. Akantha had not been born with thorns in her blood. Once her hands had been soft enough to cradle birds without startling them. Once she had believed that the world bent, however slightly, toward justice, that if you were kind, the earth would remember your footsteps and carry you gently. But the world did not remember. It took from her in quiet ways first, small betrayals, the kind that blooms slowly like rot beneath the skin. Then it took in louder ways. It took safety. It took dignity. It took names she used to answer to. It took until there was nothing left but a body that endured and a spirit that refused to die, though it had every reason to. And still, she did not hunger for vengeance. Even at her most ruined, she did not wish to become the blade that had cut her. She did not pray for her enemies to suffer. She prayed only for balance, for the scales to remember how to hold truth, for the wounded to stop being offerings. And so she went to the crossroads, not in daylight where choices pretend to be simple, but in that hour when the sky forgets what it is, when even the wind hesitates. There, where three roads split like a question no one wants to answer, she knelt. Hecate, she called, her voice rough with everything she had swallowed. Keeper of thresholds, witness of the unseen, I have nothing left to give you but what remains of me. And yet, I ask. The dark listened. It always does, though most people are too afraid of their own echoes to notice. I do not ask for revenge, she said, pressing her palms into the dust until stones bit into her skin. I ask for the power to set right what has been broken, not just in me, in all those who are silenced, erased, consumed. Give me the strength to stand where others fall. Silence answered first. Then came the sound of dogs, low and distant, as though the night itself had grown a throat. Hecate stepped forward not as a storm, but as a presence, inevitable as shadow. Three-faced in rumor, but here she wore only one, and it was enough. Ancient, unreadable, and, perhaps, curious. You ask for power, Hecate said, her voice like the turning of unseen keys. But you offer nothing. Akantha lowered her gaze. I have nothing left. Hecate studied her the way one studies a flame that refuses to die in rain. That, the goddess murmured, is rarely true. A pause, then, softer, almost amused. I will give you a chance, not because you deserve it, but because you interest me. Akantha lifted her head. Go to Aphrodite's garden, Hecate said. Steal me a rose. The words settled between them like a test disguised as a task. Akantha hesitated only a moment. And if I succeed? You will not return the same, Hecate replied. That is the only promise I make. Aphrodite's garden did not belong to the earth in the way other places did. It breathed. It shimmered with a kind of beauty that made you ache, not because you wanted it, but because it reminded you of everything you had lost. Roses bloomed there in impossible abundance, each one perfect, each one holding a different shade of longing. Akantha walked among them, and for a moment she remembered who she had been. It almost broke her. She reached for a rose, and the garden stilled. "You have come a long way to steal something you could have asked for." The voice was warm, like sunlight on skin, and just as dangerous. Aphrodite stepped from between the blossoms, radiant and terrible in her gentleness. Akantha dropped her gaze, but not her resolve. "I was sent," she said, "by Hecate. And what does she want with my roses?" "A test," Akantha answered. Then, after a breath, "And I want something more than what I am." Aphrodite studied her hands, the scars, the tremor, the stubborn strength in her fingers. Some say the goddess envied their resilience. Others say she recognized it. "You may take a rose," Aphrodite said at last. The woman blinked, startled. "But you may not cut the stem." A rule, simple and impossible. Some would later say Aphrodite forbade blades in her garden, that only Ares's weapons could sever what she had grown. Others whispered she wished to see how far a mortal would go when beauty demanded pain. Akantha did not ask which was true. She stepped forward. The rose she chose was deep crimson, its petals dark as a wound not yet healed. She wrapped her fingers around the stem. The thorns did not prick, they claimed. They sank into her flesh as though recognizing something already broken, already open. Blood welled instantly, bright and insistent, but she did not let go. She pulled. The garden seemed to inhale. Pain tore through her, sharp and relentless, but she anchored herself to it. This she understood. This was honest. Pain that asked something of her and gave something in return. The stem resisted. Relentless, Akantha persisted. With a final, raw cry, she tore the rose free. When it came loose, it brought pieces of her with it. Skin, blood, something deeper. The thorns had not simply wounded her, they had written themselves into her. She staggered back, clutching the rose, her hands ruined, her breath shattered. Aphrodite watched, not unkindly. "You could have walked away," the goddess said. Akantha shook her head. "No," she whispered, "I couldn't." Aphrodite smiled then, not in triumph, but in recognition. "Then go," she said, "and become what you've already chosen to be." By the time Akantha reached the crossroads again, she was barely standing. Blood marked her path like a second shadow. The rose was still in her grasp, its petals untouched, its beauty undiminished by the cost it had demanded. Hecate was waiting. The goddess stepped forward as Akantha fell to her knees. "You have done what was asked," Hecate said, taking in the torn flesh, the trembling body, the unbroken will. Akantha held out the rose. Hecate accepted it, but her gaze lingered on Acantha's hands. For the first time, something like grief touched the goddess's expression. "You have suffered more than I intended," she said quietly. Akantha managed a faint, broken smile. "No," she said, "only as much as was required." Hecate exhaled, and the night shifted with her breath. "Then hear me," Hecate said, her voice carrying through the unseen places of the world. "You will not stand alone again." She touched Acantha's bloodied hands. Power did not descend like lightning. It rooted itself, slow and deep, threading through pain, through memory, through the places where Akantha had refused to break. "From this moment," Hecate declared, "you are ThornBlooded." The word settled into the bones of the world. You and all who follow you will carry a piece of my power within you. You will walk between suffering and strength. You will not erase pain, but you will make it answer for what it creates. Akantha gasped as something within her changed, not healed, but transformed. The wounds in her hands did not close. They hardened, strengthened, became something new, thorns beneath the skin. You will be feared, Hecate said, because you will not turn away. You will be revered, she continued, because you will not become what harmed you. Akantha, no longer only a woman, bowed her head. And what am I now? She asked. Hecate's eyes burned like distant stars. You are the answer that suffering did not expect. And so the first ThornBlooded rose from the crossroads, carrying both wound and power in equal measure. Others would follow, the broken, the defiant, the ones who refused to let pain be the final author of their story. They would come to be known in whispers and warnings, in prayers spoken by those who needed them, and curses spoken by those who feared them. Not because they destroyed, but because they endured and then chose to shape the world anyway. And in their veins, always, the quiet reminder: pain is a doorway to the daughters of Akantha.